Ravenwood Manor had stood at the edge of town for as long as anyone could remember. Overgrown with vines and shadows, it loomed like a giant sentry, watching as the seasons changed. Locals spoke of it in whispers, especially as Halloween approached. They said that on certain nights, strange lights flickered in the windows, and ghostly figures wandered the halls. Curiosity eventually got the better of me, and on Halloween night I decided to explore the manor. My friends dared each other to go inside, but I chose to venture in alone, eager to uncover the truth behind the legends. As I approached the front door, I noticed the wood was weathered, but the handle still gleamed, inviting me to enter. With a deep breath, I pushed the door open. It creaked loudly, echoing through the empty halls. The entrance was dimly lit, dust motes swirling in the beam of my flashlight. A grand staircase spiraled upward, and doorways led off into darkness. I stepped inside, feeling a mixture of excitement and trepidation. The interior was adorned with remnants of a past life. Faded portraits hung on the walls, their subjects seemingly watching my every move. I made my way through the foyer, each step stirring up dust that had settled for years. The floorboards creaked underfoot, and the chill of the night seeped into my bones. As I moved deeper into the house, I noticed that the temperature seemed to drop. The faint sound of footsteps echoed behind me, causing my heart to race. I paused, turning to look, but there was nothing there, just the emptiness of the manor and the whispers of the past. I shook off the unease and continued my exploration. In the parlor, a large fireplace dominated the far wall, its once grand mantel now covered in cobwebs. I approached the fireplace, peering into the darkened hearth. It was then that I noticed a shimmer of light coming from a doorway to the left. Intrigued, I stepped toward it, feeling an inexplicable pull to investigate further. The light flickered like a candle, drawing me into what appeared to be a small study. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with dust-covered volumes. The room was cozy yet unsettling, and the glow emanated from a single candle resting on a desk cluttered with papers. The flame danced erratically, casting shadows that twisted and writhed across the walls. As I approached the desk, I caught a glimpse of the papers, faded letters, ink-smudged and nearly illegible. They spoke of loss, heartbreak, and despair, recounting the tragic history of the family that had once lived here. One letter stood out, its contents chilling. It spoke of a pact made in desperation, a deal struck with forces beyond understanding. A noise startled me, and I turned sharply. The door to the study had swung shut, sealing me inside. I pressed against it, trying to pull it open, but it wouldn't budge. Panic surged through me as I rattled the handle, but it remained firmly locked. The candle flickered violently, and I could feel the temperature plummet even further. Suddenly, shadows began to gather in the corners of the room. They seemed to pulse and throb, coalescing into distinct shapes, figures draped in darkness, their features obscured. I watched in horror as they drew closer, their forms twisting and writhing like smoke. I could hear whispers, incoherent and maddening, rising to a crescendo. In that moment, a figure emerged from the shadows, tall and imposing. It wore a long, tattered coat, its face hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat. I could feel its gaze piercing through the darkness, locking onto me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. My heart raced as I stumbled back, trying to find an escape. The candle flickered once more, casting erratic light across the room. The figure stepped forward, and I could see its hand extend, revealing long, bony fingers. I realized with growing dread that it was not just a figment of my imagination. It was a manifestation of the pact described in the letters, a remnant of the family's desperate bargain. As I fought to breathe, I remembered the tales of the manor. The family had sacrificed their souls to escape their grief, binding them to the house. Their anguish had given rise to the shadows, and I was now ensnared in their fate. The whispers grew louder, chanting in a language I couldn't comprehend, echoing the despair that hung heavily in the air. Desperation consumed me as I turned to the window, searching for a way out. It was then that I saw the moonlight spilling through the glass, illuminating a path outside. I rushed toward it, pushing against the shadows that clawed at my heels. The figure lunged, but I slipped past, barreling through the door as it finally yielded. I stumbled into the hallway, heart racing, and ran toward the front door. The house groaned around me, the walls closing in as if trying to keep me trapped. I could hear the whispers crescendoing behind me, urging me to turn back, but I pressed on, fueled by fear and adrenaline. I reached the front door, yanking it open with all my strength. I burst outside into the cool night air, gasping for breath as I tumbled down the steps. The moon shone brightly overhead, casting a silvery glow on the lawn. I didn't stop running until I reached the edge of the property. As I looked back at the manor, I saw the shadows swirl within the windows, and the candle flickered one last time. A chill ran down my spine as I understood the truth. The spirits would never be free. They were trapped in a cycle of despair, waiting for the next soul to claim. I walked away from Ravenwood Manor, the whispers lingering in my mind. The stories of the lost family and their tragic pact haunted me. Each Halloween, I would remember that night, and I knew the manor would continue to stand, waiting for the curious and the brave, forever ensnaring those who dared to seek the truth. Halloween was always a time for fun and games, but this year, the excitement turned to fear. My friends and I heard rumors of a game called the Trickster's Game. It was said to take place in an old, abandoned house on the outskirts of town. Anyone who entered had to survive the night and outsmart the trickster, a malevolent spirit that thrived on fear. Curiosity pushed us to explore the house. As we approached, a chill filled the air, and the wind howled through the trees. The house stood tall and dark, its windows shattered, and the door creaked ominously as we pushed it open. Inside, the air was filled with dust and decay. Shadows lurked in every corner. We split up, each searching for clues. A flickering light caught my attention in the main room, and I followed it, leaving my friends behind. In the center of the room, an old table was set with items, candles, a deck of cards, and a strange box. The atmosphere changed, and I felt the trickster's presence, a mix of anticipation and dread. I picked up a card, and suddenly, laughter echoed through the house. I realized I had triggered the game. The lights dimmed, and shadows twisted around me. The trickster emerged, a shadowy figure with an unsettling grin. I felt my heart race as the laughter grew louder, taunting me. The game began. I had to complete challenges, each one more frightening than the last. I faced illusions of my worst fears, lost friends, dark corners, and things that went bump in the night. The trickster reveled in my terror, feeding off my fear. As I struggled to complete the tasks, I could hear my friends calling for me, their voices fading into the background. I fought to remember the purpose of the game. I had to outsmart the trickster to escape. With each challenge, I felt my strength waning. The shadows closed in, and I could sense the trickster drawing closer. I needed to act quickly. I recalled the cards on the table. Each one held a secret to break the trickster's hold. I grabbed the deck and began to match cards, recalling the order from memory. The room trembled as I laid down the final card. The trickster howled in rage, and the shadows erupted, pulling back as if wounded. I felt a rush of energy as I stood tall against the trickster. The laughter faded, replaced by an eerie silence. The house began to crumble around me, and I rushed toward the exit, desperate to escape. I burst through the door, gasping for breath. The trickster's laughter echoed in the distance, a promise that the game was not over. Now, the house stands abandoned, a warning to those who dare enter. Each Halloween, the trickster waits for new players, hungry for fear and eager to reclaim what was lost. The memories of the game linger in the air, a reminder of the darkness that thrives on our deepest anxieties. Every Halloween, a legend circulated about a magical pumpkin hidden in a distant field. It was said that anyone who found it could make one wish, but the price was always steep. Intrigued by the stories, I decided to search for the wishing pumpkin. My friends joined me as we ventured into the field just as twilight settled. The air was crisp and the ground was littered with fallen leaves. As we walked, the moon rose high, illuminating the patches of pumpkins scattered across the field. We searched for hours, but the pumpkin remained elusive. Just as we were about to give up, we spotted a glowing figure in the distance. It was a large pumpkin, unlike any we had seen before, its surface shimmering under the moonlight. As we approached, I felt a strange energy emanating from it. The pumpkin was perfectly round and vibrant, with a carved face that seemed to shift in the light. My heart raced as I reached out to touch it, feeling warmth radiate from its surface. The legend echoed in my mind. Make a wish and anything could happen. I closed my eyes and thought of my deepest desire. I felt the air around me crackle with energy, and I whispered my wish into the night. Suddenly, the ground trembled, and a gust of wind swept through the field. The pumpkin glowed brighter, and shadows danced around me. I felt a sense of euphoria, but it quickly faded as I realized something was wrong. The air thickened, and the shadows began to close in. My friends backed away, fear etched on their faces. The once friendly glow of the pumpkin turned sinister, its carved grin widening. The energy that had felt so warm became icy and suffocating. I turned to run, but the shadows had formed a barrier, trapping us in the field. The pumpkin's glow pulsed, and dark tendrils reached out, wrapping around my legs. I fought against them, but they pulled me toward the waiting pumpkin. The last thing I heard was the echo of my wish twisting into a taunt, a mocking reminder of the price I had to pay. Darkness consumed me, and I felt myself being drawn into the very essence of the pumpkin. Now the field stands empty, the wishing pumpkin waiting for the next unsuspecting soul. Each Halloween it glows brightly, drawing in those searching for wishes. But the whispers of those lost echo through the night, a warning of the hidden dangers of desire. The old farmhouse at the edge of town had always intrigued me. It had been abandoned for years, with broken windows and weeds creeping up the walls. Halloween night was the perfect time to explore it, a chance to uncover its secrets. As my friends and I approached the house, the wind howled through the trees. The creaking gate protested as I pushed it open. We stepped inside, the door swinging shut behind us. The air was stale and thick, filled with the scent of dust and decay. Inside, the walls were lined with faded photographs, their subjects staring blankly. The floors creaked beneath our feet as we moved deeper into the house. The shadows seemed to shift, hiding something in their depths. We made our way to the back, where a pumpkin patch had overtaken the garden. Among the pumpkins stood a massive scarecrow, its form twisted and grotesque. The closer we got, the more I felt a strange energy radiating from it. I noticed something strange. The scarecrow's head was a real pumpkin, its face carved into a sinister grin. The air grew colder as we stood before it. A sense of dread washed over me, but my friends were too caught up in the thrill to notice. Suddenly, the ground trembled, and a low rumble echoed through the air. The scarecrow's head turned, its eyes glowing in the darkness. Fear gripped me as I backed away, but the others laughed, thinking it was just a trick of the light. Without warning, the scarecrow lunged forward, its limbs moving with unnatural speed. The air filled with the sound of rustling straw as it reached for us. I turned to run, but the path behind me had vanished, replaced by towering walls of corn. The pumpkins began to glow, their faces shifting into terrifying grins. Shadows swirled around me, closing in as I desperately searched for a way out. I could hear my friends screaming, their voices swallowed by the darkness. I stumbled, falling to the ground as the scarecrow advanced. Vines erupted from the earth, wrapping around my ankles and dragging me toward the pumpkin patch. I fought against them, but they pulled me closer to the waiting mouths of the pumpkins. The last thing I saw was the scarecrow looming over me, its grin impossibly wide. Then, darkness closed in, consuming my vision and drowning out my screams. Now, the old farmhouse stands silent, the scarecrow waiting for the next curious soul to wander too close. Each Halloween, it comes alive, ready to claim new victims who dare to trespass in its domain. The whispers of those who disappeared echo in the air, a haunting reminder of the price of curiosity. Every Halloween, I prided myself on being the best pumpkin carver in town. Each year, I carved intricate designs that impressed everyone. This year, I found a massive pumpkin in an abandoned field. It was perfect, smooth and bright orange, just waiting for my touch. After hours of carving, I placed the pumpkin on my porch, eager to show it off. I went to bed feeling proud, but when I woke up, it was gone. I searched the neighborhood, but no one had seen it. Frustration turned to determination as I set out to find the thief. As I walked down the street, I spotted something strange. An old scarecrow in a neighboring yard. It was crooked, and its pumpkin head looked like a twisted version of mine. I felt a shiver, but dismissed it as my imagination. I had to focus on finding my pumpkin. That night, I decided to confront the scarecrow. I crept into the yard, the moonlight casting eerie shadows. As I approached, I heard laughter, high-pitched and sinister. The scarecrow's head slowly turned, and I felt a chill run down my spine. The pumpkin was gone, replaced by the scarecrow's grinning face. I realized it wasn't just a decoration. It was alive. A deep voice echoed in my mind, and panic set in. I turned to run, but the ground beneath me shifted. The scarecrow's arms reached out, vines twisting around my ankles. I fought against the grip, but it was too strong. I stumbled back, falling to the ground. The scarecrow leaned closer, its voice a whisper in the night. I could feel its cold breath, and I knew I was trapped. The shadows closed in as I struggled to escape. I could hear laughter, not just from the scarecrow, but from the darkness itself. I crawled toward the edge of the yard, but the vines tightened, pulling me back. The last thing I saw was the scarecrow's twisted grin, eyes glowing with hunger. Darkness enveloped me, and I was consumed by the shadows. Now the scarecrow stands in the yard, its pumpkin head watching over the neighborhood. Every Halloween it waits for the next unsuspecting soul, hungry for more. My pumpkin was never found, and I remain trapped in the darkness, forever part of the curse that claims those who dare to steal from it. Every October, our town held a harvest festival. It was the highlight of the year, featuring pumpkin carving contests, hay rides, and a haunted corn maze. This year they introduced something new, a possessed scarecrow, said to come alive at midnight. As the festival began, I felt a chill in the air. The scarecrow stood in the middle of the maze, its clothes tattered and straw poking out. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching me, its button eyes glinting in the light. When midnight approached, my friends dared each other to enter the maze. We stepped inside, laughter echoing through the rows of corn. The walls of the maze towered over us, and the shadows grew deeper with each step. The scarecrow loomed in the distance, a dark figure against the moonlight. As we moved further in, the atmosphere changed. The air felt thick and the laughter faded into silence. I turned to see the scarecrow shifting slightly, its head turning to follow our movements. A sense of unease washed over me. Suddenly the air grew colder and an unsettling whisper swept through the maze. I felt an icy grip around my heart, urging me to leave. But my friends were too caught up in the thrill, wandering deeper into the darkness. Then it happened. The scarecrow stepped down from its post, moving with unnatural speed. Its limbs creaked as it advanced, and I realized we were trapped. Panic surged as I turned to run, but the maze shifted around me, twisting and turning in impossible ways. I could hear my friends screaming, their voices growing distant. The rustling of straw filled the air, and the ground trembled beneath me. I stumbled, trying to find a way out, but the path led me back to the center of the maze. The scarecrow was there, its grin wide and terrifying. I felt the cold vines wrapping around my ankles, pulling me closer to it. Shadows danced around me, closing in as I struggled against the grip of the maze. In a final, desperate attempt, I lunged for the exit, but it remained out of reach. The scarecrow's laughter echoed in the night, mingling with the whispers of the shadows. I fell to the ground, darkness closing in around me. Now the harvest festival stands silent, the maze waiting for the next group of thrill-seekers. The scarecrow remains, forever watching, always hungry for new souls to claim. The laughter of lost spirits lingers in the air, a reminder of the curse that grips the festival each year. The corn maze had always been a favorite Halloween attraction. Each year it grew larger and more complex. This year, scarecrows were added, standing at every turn, watching with lifeless eyes. My friends and I eagerly entered the maze, excitement buzzing in the air. As we ventured deeper, the sun set and darkness enveloped us. The maze felt different now, the shadows growing thicker. The laughter we had shared faded, replaced by an unsettling silence. The scarecrows loomed over us, their presence heavy and foreboding. We wandered, trying to find our way, but the paths twisted unexpectedly. Every turn seemed to lead us back to where we started. The air turned cold and a sense of unease settled in. My skin prickled as I noticed the scarecrows moving, just a little. Their heads tilted, and their eyes seemed to follow us. We quickened our pace, but the maze seemed to close in around us. The scarecrows began to shift, their limbs creaking as they stepped down from their posts. Panic surged through me as I realized we were no longer alone. The rustling of corn filled the air, growing louder and more chaotic. Shadows danced around us, and I could feel eyes watching from the darkness. My friends' voices echoed in the maze, but they grew fainter as the scarecrows advanced. I ran, heart pounding, searching for a way out. The stalks brushed against me, cold and unyielding. I turned to look back, and the scarecrows were closer now, their hollow faces twisted into grotesque grins. The ground trembled as they moved, an eerie rhythm that matched my racing heart. I stumbled, falling to the ground. The corn rose around me, a towering wall of green blocking my escape. The laughter of the scarecrows mixed with the rustling of the leaves, creating a haunting symphony. I crawled, desperate to find a path, but the corn seemed to shift, trapping me deeper within. Vines emerged from the earth, wrapping around my ankles, pulling me down. I struggled, but they tightened, dragging me toward the heart of the maze. The last thing I saw was the scarecrows surrounding me. their faces glowing in the dim light, eyes filled with hunger. Darkness enveloped me, swallowing my screams. Now the corn maze stands empty, the scarecrows watching patiently. Each Halloween they awaken, waiting for the next group of unsuspecting visitors to wander into their grasp. The rustling of corn and the laughter of lost souls fill the air, a reminder of the price of curiosity. I've always loved Halloween. Dressing up, going door to door for candy, and the thrill of the night filled me with excitement. This year, my friends and I planned to visit every house on Birch Street. It was known for its decorations and generous treats. But at the very end of the street stood an old house we always avoided. It was unremarkable, except for a towering scarecrow beside the porch. Its head was a hollowed-out pumpkin, glowing with a flickering light. We laughed at the idea of it being spooky and decided to knock on the door of the last house. When we arrived, the door was slightly ajar. We pushed it open, stepping inside. The air felt different, heavier. The room was dark, lit only by the glow from the scarecrow outside. I felt a chill run down my spine, but we pressed on, searching for treats. The atmosphere shifted, and the laughter from earlier faded. The scarecrow's pumpkin head seemed to shift, the light growing brighter. I turned to my friends, but they were nowhere in sight. I moved toward the window, peering outside. The scarecrow was now staring directly at me, its grin wider than before. The laughter I had heard earlier morphed into a low growl. I felt the ground tremble beneath my feet, and the shadows in the corners of the room deepened. I turned to find my friends, but they had vanished. Panic rose within me. I stepped back, but the door slammed shut. The air grew colder and the walls closed in. Vines snaked from the floorboards, creeping toward me. I tried to move, but my feet felt glued to the ground. I could see the scarecrow through the window, its head tilted, watching with hungry eyes. Desperation surged as I fought against the vines, but they tightened around my legs, pulling me closer to the floor. I could hear whispers echoing in the darkness, a chorus of taunts and warnings. The scarecrow's laughter joined the shadows, creating a chilling melody. In a final attempt, I lunged toward the door, but it wouldn't open. The vines were relentless, dragging me toward the center of the room. I felt the coldness seep into my bones, filling me with dread. The last image burned into my mind was the scarecrow's face, its pumpkin grin glowing in the darkness. Then, everything faded to black. Now the house stands silent at the end of Birch Street, the scarecrow watching from the yard. Every Halloween it waits, hungry for new victims drawn in by the promise of treats. The laughter of children echoes faintly in the air, but the house remains empty, filled only with shadows and whispers of those who disappeared. Maple Street was known for the best trick-or-treating. Every house was decorated and candy flowed freely. But one house at the end of the street stood apart. It was dark and decaying, its yard overtaken by weeds. The old scarecrow in the front yard was a chilling sight. It never participated in Halloween, and rumors of a curse surrounded it. This Halloween, my friends dared me to knock on the door. I hesitated but felt drawn to the challenge. The scarecrow loomed over me, its tattered clothes fluttering in the wind. Its head was shaped like a pumpkin, hollowed out, with a menacing grin that seemed to grow wider as I approached. I reached the porch and knocked. Silence enveloped me. I glanced back, and the scarecrow stood still, its button eyes seemingly fixed on me. I felt a chill creep down my spine. I turned back to the door, but it creaked open on its own. Inside, the air was cold and stale. Shadows danced on the walls, and the faint smell of rot lingered. I stepped inside, the door closing behind me. I called out, but no response came. The darkness felt heavy, pressing in around me. As I explored the dim rooms, I heard rustling outside. I moved to the window, peering out into the yard. The scarecrow was gone. Panic surged through me. I turned to leave, but the door slammed shut. The air thickened, and a feeling of dread washed over me. I backed away, but the shadows in the corners seemed to grow. Suddenly, the scarecrow reappeared at the window, its grin impossibly wide, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. I tried to scream, but the sound caught in my throat. The scarecrow's straw fingers pressed against the glass, and I could feel the darkness closing in. I stumbled backward, searching for an exit, but the room twisted, leading me deeper into the house. Vines crept from the corners, snaking toward me, pulling me closer to the walls. I fought against them, desperation clawing at my mind. The shadows laughed, a low, mocking sound that echoed in my ears. In a final attempt, I dashed toward the door, but it wouldn't budge. The scarecrow's laughter joined the whispers of the shadows, filling the room with dread. I felt the vines tighten around my legs, dragging me down as I struggled. The last thing I saw was the scarecrow's face, grinning wide and filled with hunger. Then darkness enveloped me. Now the house stands silent on Maple Street, its windows dark and empty. The scarecrow remains in the yard, waiting for the next curious soul to wander too close. Each Halloween it comes alive, always hungry, always ready to claim another victim. It seemed like a perfect place to pick pumpkins. Just outside of town, Farmer Wyatt's pumpkin patch was always filled with large, round pumpkins. But there was one rule: don't stay after dark. No one ever explained why, but it was something we all respected. My friends and I didn't believe in superstitions. On Halloween night, we decided to sneak in after the sun set. The patch looked different at night, shadows stretching across the ground. The pumpkins appeared to shift in the dark, their shapes twisting and turning. We wandered deeper into the patch, laughing and teasing each other, until we stumbled upon a cluster of pumpkins much larger than the others. I knelt beside one, brushing dirt from its surface. It was perfect, but as I lifted it, something cold wrapped around my wrist. A vine, thick and thorny, had latched onto me. I jerked my arm, trying to break free, but the vine tightened, pulling me closer to the pumpkin. I looked around for my friends, but they were gone, swallowed by the darkness. Panic surged as I felt more vines creeping around my legs, dragging me down. The air was thick with an unsettling silence. My heart raced as I fought against the grip of the vines. They tightened, cutting into my skin, making it harder to breathe. I could hear faint whispers, teasing and sinister, echoing in the night. With a surge of adrenaline, I yanked my arm free from the vine's grasp. I turned to run, but the path twisted and turned, leading me back toward the pumpkins. They loomed over me, their once friendly faces now twisted into grins of malice. I stumbled, falling to the ground. The vines rushed toward me, a living mass of green and brown, pulsing with energy. I could feel their coldness against my skin as they wrapped around my ankles, pulling me closer to the gaping mouths of the pumpkins. Fear gripped me. I screamed, but no one was there to hear me. The world narrowed, filled with the sound of rustling leaves and the sinister laughter of the pumpkins. One by one, they began to open, revealing jagged teeth glistening in the moonlight. The last thing I saw was the grinning face of a pumpkin, wide and hungry before darkness consumed me. Now the pumpkin patch stands empty, waiting for the next curious souls. Every Halloween I can feel the vines reach for me, drawing in new victims to join me in the shadows. The pumpkins are always hungry, and they always need new seeds. I always hated the scarecrow in Johnson's Field. It loomed at the edge of the pumpkin patch, arms stretched out like a twisted welcome. Its burlap sack face was crude, with one button eye missing and the other hanging by a thread. Growing up, we dared each other to touch it, but no one ever had the courage. This Halloween, after years of avoiding it, I took the dare. My friends laughed behind me, their excitement mixed with fear, but I stepped closer, heart racing. The wind died and an unsettling heaviness filled the air. Something in its button eye glinted under the moonlight. As I reached out, the scarecrow's head turned slowly, locking its gaze on me. I froze. My mind raced, convincing me it was just a trick of the light. But then it moved again, the button eye flashing as if it were alive. I backed away, the laughter of my friends fading as panic set in. My heart pounded as the scarecrow's limbs twitched, its straw fingers rustling. It was not just a decoration, it was something else entirely. Then, a voice echoed in my mind, cold and insistent. I turned to run, but the ground seemed to shift beneath me. The scarecrow stepped down from its post, moving with unnatural speed. My friends were gone, their laughter replaced by a heavy silence. I ran, adrenaline coursing through me. I could hear the rustling of straw behind me, closer and closer. Each glance over my shoulder revealed its twisted form just out of reach, its grinning face etched in my memory. I stumbled through the pumpkin patch, weaving between the orange spheres. The night air felt thick, and the shadows seemed to stretch and pull at my limbs. I could feel it gaining on me, the scent of damp earth and rot filling my lungs. Panic surged as I reached the edge of the field, but the scarecrow was there, blocking my escape. It towered over me, a monstrous figure against the moonlight, its grin widening. I was trapped, surrounded by darkness. In that moment, time froze. I realized the truth. It wasn't just a scarecrow, it was a curse. The once harmless figure had become a predator, feeding on fear and despair. I was just another offering in its twisted game. As I fell to my knees, the last thing I heard was a whisper, slithering through the night like smoke, promising that I would never escape. The darkness closed in around me, swallowing my scream. Now, every Halloween, the scarecrow stands at the edge of that patch, waiting for the next curious soul to wander too close. I'm just a part of its curse now, trapped in the field, forever lost among the pumpkins. The autumn air had grown crisp as Halloween approached. I lived near an old farm that had fallen into disrepair over the years, its fields now choked with tall, untamed corn. The locals said the place was haunted, but I never believed in ghost stories. I often wandered through the fields, enjoying the rustling of leaves and the solitude. One evening, just days before Halloween, I decided to explore the cornfield at dusk. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows that stretched across the ground. As I walked deeper into the field, I noticed something unusual. There, among the stalks, stood a scarecrow. It was different from the others I'd seen before. Its head was missing. I felt a chill run down my spine as I approached. The scarecrow's tattered clothes flapped in the wind, and the empty neck of its burlap sack seemed to stare back at me. I had never seen it before, and a sense of dread washed over me. I stepped back, unsure if I should turn around or investigate further. As darkness enveloped the field, I hesitated but felt compelled to stay. The wind picked up, rustling the corn around me, creating a haunting sound that echoed in the stillness. The scarecrow stood tall, its figure looming against the darkening sky. I tried to convince myself it was just a decoration, a part of some Halloween display, but something felt wrong. Suddenly, a noise broke the silence. A low whisper seemed to drift through the corn, sending shivers down my spine. I turned to look around, my heart racing. The air grew heavy, and I could feel an unseen presence lurking in the shadows. I knew I should leave, but I felt rooted to the spot, my eyes drawn back to the scarecrow. Without warning, the wind shifted, and I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. The scarecrow had turned slightly, as if it was watching me. Panic surged through me. I stumbled back, turning to run, but the cornfield seemed to stretch on endlessly, closing in around me. I could hear the rustling of the stalks, like whispers urging me to leave. As I ran, I could feel the presence behind me, closing the distance. My breath came in quick gasps as I dodged between the tall plants. I turned my head briefly, and in that instant I saw it. The headless scarecrow was no longer still. It was moving, its arms reaching out as if trying to grab me. Fear propelled me forward. I ran faster, pushing through the thick stalks, desperate to find the edge of the field. The whispers grew louder, almost mocking, as I stumbled through the dark. The path seemed to twist and turn, leading me deeper into the maze of corn. Finally, I spotted a break in the plants ahead. The light from the moon shone down, illuminating the path to freedom. I surged toward it, adrenaline fueling my flight. Just as I thought I might escape, I felt a cold breeze pass through me, and I heard the sound of shuffling footsteps behind me. I burst through the edge of the field and into the open air, but I didn't stop. I sprinted towards the safety of my home, not daring to look back. The whispers faded, but the memory of the scarecrow remained. Once I reached my front door, I locked it behind me and leaned against it, panting. The night felt quiet again, but the chill in the air lingered. I knew I wouldn't be going back to that field. Not now, not ever. The headless scarecrow haunted my thoughts, a reminder that some things are best left alone, especially in the dark. The town of Hollow Creek had always been shrouded in mystery, especially around Halloween. Legends of ghosts and spirits circulated, but none were as chilling as the tale of the old Montgomery house at the end of Willow Lane. Abandoned for decades, the house had a reputation for strange occurrences and inexplicable happenings. Locals spoke of it in hushed tones, warning anyone foolish enough to approach. This Halloween, curiosity got the better of me. With friends in tow, we decided to explore the Montgomery house. As we neared the entrance, a chill ran down my spine and a gust of wind sent leaves swirling around us. The house loomed ahead, its silhouette jagged against the darkening sky. We stepped onto the creaking porch, the wooden planks groaning under our weight. The front door stood ajar, as if inviting us in. With one last shared glance, we crossed the threshold into the darkness. Inside, the musty scent of decay greeted us. Dust hung in the air, swirling in the faint light filtering through cracked windows. Shadows clung to the walls, whispering secrets of the past. We explored room after room, each one filled with remnants of a long-forgotten life. faded photographs, broken furniture, and an unsettling silence that wrapped around us. In the back of the house, we discovered a staircase leading to the basement. It was darker down there, and an eerie stillness enveloped us as we descended. The wooden steps creaked beneath our feet, each sound echoing like a warning. At the bottom, we found ourselves in a small, dimly lit room lined with jars filled with strange contents, preserved remnants of what might have once been alive. A feeling of unease settled over me as I examined the jars, each one labeled with names and dates. They told stories of those who had lived in Hollow Creek, but the last few jars bore names that sent shivers down my spine, recent names, names of people who had vanished in the area over the years. As I turned to leave the room, I noticed a flicker of light from the far corner. I approached cautiously, my heart pounding. The light danced erratically, illuminating a figure sitting on the floor, a shadowy outline of a woman, her features obscured by darkness. I felt drawn to her, an inexplicable urge to understand who she was. But just as I reached out, the figure vanished, leaving me standing alone in the dim light. I called out to my friends, but there was no response. Panic set in as I hurried back to the staircase, but I realized I was disoriented. The basement felt larger than I remembered, the walls seeming to shift around me. I stumbled through the room, desperately searching for a way out. The shadows twisted and turned, playing tricks on my mind. My breath quickened as I felt a presence nearby, a whisper brushing against my ear, sending chills down my spine. I could almost hear faint murmurs, fragmented sentences that drifted in and out of comprehension. Suddenly, the room erupted into chaos. Shadows lurched toward me, their forms shifting and writhing. I ran back to the staircase, but it was gone, replaced by a solid wall. I pressed my hands against the cold surface, searching for a way out, but the darkness closed in around me. In that moment of despair, a memory surged to the surface. Something I had read about Hollow Creek. The town had once been a thriving community, but a string of tragedies had left it hollow. People spoke of rituals gone wrong, of a darkness that had seeped into the very ground. The whispers grew louder, swirling around me like a storm. I could sense the anger, the pain of those who had been lost. They were trapped, forever tied to the house, unable to find peace. The realization hit me hard. I had walked into their world, and now I was part of it. Determined to escape, I focused on the whispers, trying to understand their stories. I closed my eyes and concentrated on the presence surrounding me. I could feel their sorrow, their longing for release. If I could uncover their pain, maybe I could help them find a way to move on. In the depths of the darkness, I began to speak their names, echoing the labels on the jars. Each name brought a response, a flicker of light illuminating the shadows. The murmurs transformed into cries, their anguish wrapping around me like a shroud. But I pressed on, determined to break through the barrier that held them captive. The room shifted again, and I found myself standing before the shadowy figure once more. This time she appeared clearer, her face sorrowful yet hopeful. She reached out, and I felt a surge of energy course through me. I understood now. She was one of the lost souls, trapped in the cycle of despair. I closed my eyes, and with a deep breath I wished for their release. A wave of warmth washed over me, and the shadows began to recede. The whispers turned into a harmonious chorus, lifting the weight from my shoulders. I felt the presence of the lost souls surround me, guiding me toward the light. As I opened my eyes, the darkness melted away, revealing the staircase once more. I dashed up the steps, feeling the warmth of hope replace the chill that had gripped me. The front door swung open, and I burst out into the cool night air, gasping for breath. My friends stood outside, their faces filled with worry. They had been searching for me, and I realized I was no longer alone. Together, we fled the Montgomery house, leaving the darkness behind. From that day on, I carried the stories of Hollow Creek with me, the whispers of the lost forever etched in my memory. Each Halloween, I returned to the old farmhouse, lighting candles and leaving offerings for the spirits who had once been trapped within its walls. The darkness still lingered, but I knew the power of hope could break through even the deepest shadows.